Throughout history, people have created art for a variety of reasons. Some art has been functional for things like telling the time or the seasons. Other art has been used to bolster a person's personal reputation or prop up a political state. Other people have made art to become famous or wealthy. Sometimes art serves as propaganda. Sometimes it's social justice. But one major function of art, and one of its original purposes and its ongoing purpose to this day, is its use in worship. In today's poem, we're going to explore that original use of art, what happens when it goes away, and what we're to make of it today. Welcome to a reading, summary, and analysis of Roger Dylan Turner's The Exhibits. So with this being a longer poem, I'm actually going to leave my notes color coordinated below each stanza if you want to take a look at sort of the analysis while we do the reading, and then we'll talk more about it and the overall function of art once the poem is finished. I speak, but you hear not, O idol, you sit idle on a pedestal in this muse's house amongst displays. Not for the worship of ancient days. No altar is before you, no incense leavens the air, still many come from everywhere to wonder at your forgotten grace, and children laugh when they see no nose amidst your face. The liquid flesh of yesterday has since worn thin and flaked away. By moths the clothes were eaten through, now holy garments cover you. One once buried by earth and rain, for these have power to profane the work of many a pagan's hand. On marble legs you used to stand, with upper limbs stretched towards the sky to summon spirits from on high. And though a head and bust remain, they are both empty just the same. To say they were dead would be words too high. A body must live before it can die. Though Ramses' form lies sunk in hungry sand, before he was a breathing, moving man. No wind has swelled your lungs, and it never will, since dedication you have had none to fill. Though your calves have crumbled and dust became, from the days they stood stiff and lame. Some scenic shards sit beside this bowless trunk of rock, taken from the burst womb of a Corinthian croc. If you compare them both, the statue fared much better. But more morals are taught by those ostraka slivers. What musical monster lays against the mutilated tree? What mesmerized girl dances near to its amorous decree? The tempter of the orchard, from since the world began, a goat-like demon long ago took the name of Pan. Where is that spirit's glory, his story, who can tell? Examine the piece of urn and see how far he fell. The horns that once adorned his head, like the rest of it, are lost. So too the belly and chest, and yet few parts persist embossed, left floating in his magic flute, with which the tunes he played were said to cast their evil spell on both the ewe and maid. As for his other features, ravaged by sword, ash, and soot, 'twas foolishness to think a god would bear a beastly butt. Regarding her for whom he called, her elegance was stripped. The dainty legs by which she skipped were mercilessly ripped. The lovely robes that ebbed and flowed like an Olympian vein were scraped by nature's harsh caress, leaving little of that stain. The head is hanging on a chip with serene face, so blissfully unaware of every disgrace. Who beyond the realm above can know creation's toil? A representative of which has suffered also, a hand that reached toward heaven to grab the sun and cloud, and begged them respectively to bless the leaf and ground, its fingers fitted with flora and fruitage fleshed throughout. Such beauty cannot compare to a commerce amount. The crown of its vitality was cut long ago, along with its royal jewels, which never more will grow. They left a sullen pillar, stripped barren for shame, and with them was taken the painter's claim to fame. Woe to the wasted vestiges formed in an age of fantasy, despite enduring for so long. They are but empty memories. Tell me, tongueless statue, where is he who made you, who chiseled your design, who sought to shape a lifeless stone into someone divine? By now his days are surely done, his bones are mixed in soil. With what did you repay that for all his skill and toil? The same to you, O pottery, whose dresser lies in sod. What did you pay the one who pained to illustrate a god? Did you take them by their fingers to lead their souls above and give them wings of feathers in the fashion of a dove? Or did you give them other forms to hold still on the earth, as kings or fish or even beings, a cycle of rebirth? Are they now cooked like cuts of meat, caught deep within a kettle, or left adrift in limbo with cases yet to settle? Is it just to punish twice for the sins made in one life? Is death not enough to face? Or can heaven not keep pace? If man constantly returns, why take that which he yearns and dispose of what he learns for a new and distinct life with its own success and strife? You never claimed their spirits, for you had not such yourselves. To reach this conclusion, every honest thinker delves. So what I love about this poem is it asks the question of what is art and what function does art serve? A lot of the exhibits mentioned in this poem, the sculpture, the pottery, they're pieces that were used for religious reasons and are now just museum pieces. And there's something very interesting about one group's, idol is another group's art. I suppose the fact that they're put in a museum indicates some form of importance, but certainly it's not the type of importance that they once saw when they were the objects of worship. This poem also has a number of religious themes to it. You see references biblical throughout, as well as bouncing and competing with the more mythological forms of antiquity. And, for a poem that asks, what is art and how is it tied to the act of creation? Religiously, if you believe we're created, that's a good explanation as to why we create. Now, not everyone believes that, but I believe the speaker in this poem does. And that question of what is a poem? Why do we create to begin with? I love that this is a prose poem, because at first glance, it doesn't even seem to be a poem. Now, does it? It seems to be an essay or a short story. But it works like a poem, and there's a long history of poems taking a number of shapes other than the standard ones that we're used to. Here you see the rhymes that are built within at the end of the phrases, and just two examples of the alliteration. And these heavy reliances on pattern, a lot of the poem is rhythmic. There's a meter to it. These patterns are what make it a prose poem as opposed to just a short story. So when we're looking at the question of what is art, I think it's great to explore that in a poem that doesn't look like a poem at first glance. It's sort of that function meets form mentality. And you even see that in the last stanza here, where you have, or can heaven not keep pace, which is a question of, can heaven keep up with the progression of time? If man constantly returns, why take that for which he yearns and dispose of what he learns for a new and distinct life? So it builds this inner rhyme into the middle of the sentence. So while you have life and strife, you have learns and yearns, and it just speeds the poem up, which is beautiful because the poem is asking, or can heaven not keep pace? And that's just one example of using the sound of words to match what the poem is trying to express. But the great thing about this is it also shows that these poetic devices don't need to strictly be used in verse settings. I would say this is a poem, but you can use rhyme, you can use alliteration, you can use metaphor, simile in essays, in other types of prose writing that don't fall into the poem category. They can still benefit from poetic devices and certainly makes them more interesting to read, especially out loud. So this poem is by an upcoming poet, an emerging poet perhaps, which also asks the question of, what poetry do we study if it's not done by someone who's immensely well known and the scholars have, advocated for? Is it worthy of study? And this is a question that we're wrestling with today. Who gets into the canon and who doesn't get into the canon? And what does their names and their backgrounds indicate and suggest about their poems? And can we separate that? If this poem wasn't by Roger Dylan Turner, if it was by Dylan Thomas, would we see it differently? I think we would. I don't think it's possible not to. But I love that I got the chance to review it, and I really appreciate RDT giving me a chance to look at it. If you want to check out more of Turner's work, he just published this wonderful short little allegorical story, The Raven and the Rosebush, which I have sitting on my desk right now. It's these short little chapters with really interesting illustrations along with them, and I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to check out his work. He's been a phenomenal supporter of the channel. He's my one and only patron on Patreon right now, so I really appreciate Roger, and I have no doubt that this guy is on a trajectory that's going to far surpass my own poetic abilities if he's not already. So check out his other work down in the description there, and hopefully this poem gave you a good chance to think about what is art, what functions does it serve, and how do those functions change and transform as time passes. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Happy reading.